right, well,
We're
the
live.
camera's live, it's 7 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and call the Nottingham Planning Board, Zoning Board Joint Meeting for Wednesday, August 30th, 2023 to order. Before we jump into anything for the agenda, I'll just have everybody that's here go around and introduce themselves.
Kevin Bassett, zoning board alternate.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Jim McKinnon, Planning Board.
Teresa Bascom, Zoning and Planning Board.
Edward Veal, Planning Board.
Terry Bonza, ZBA.
Bonnie Winona McKinnon, zoning board. Susan Mooney, planning board and conservation commission.
Kathy Mayo, zoning board.
Larry Haney, SRPC.
Sam Demert, Conservation Commission.
Dale Sylvia, Building Inspector, Code Enforcement.
And we have Mr. Moran for the Select Board and the ex officio member of the Planning Board joining us as well. And Alana Kenny, Land Use Clerk, is also in the room and that's with us tonight. So the purpose of this meeting, we try to do this every year, and we try to open it up to other land use boards, other departments in town, but to have just a touch point with all these individuals to get an idea of what each board is seeing, what the town is seeing, ideally kind of what's going on around us for other towns, as we look for, planning for the remainder of this year, planning for 2024 and beyond, and also for warrant articles and things of that nature. So, so some of the things that have come out of this discussion in the past have helped us shape warrant articles to try to alleviate some common things that were going to the ZBA that seemed needless and things of that nature. So I had sent out some information, or Alana sent it out for like an agenda. This is just more of kind of a running list of what the planning board has running and on our radar. Some of it we won't spend very much time on. Other pieces, we'll definitely dive into more detail on. Some of it's just housekeeping, but it's here to track it and make sure that everybody's aware of what we're looking to implement. And the way we usually do these discussions is we'll kind of go through the items and then just have general discussion around the room for anybody that wants to chime in. Is there anything else that's not on the agenda that anybody would like to have me add to it before we begin? I know one other additional item that was brought up is for us to look at either at this meeting or in the future what requires or cues off a site plan. Specifically, I know this has come up for home occupations or change and expansions of use, and and probably who determines what that is. So that'll be a piece that we talk about too. All right. So Alana was very great. She created a large packet for everybody of some of the items that we got in here, including the agenda items. The first thing was something that SRPC had mentioned to us was a potential update to our Aquifer Protection District map. Realistically, it's and I don't think we have both copies of it, but the version that's online right now is kind of not the wrong version, but if you ever click on it, it takes forever to load. It's a very large file size. So there's no, Blair, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no meaningful change. There's no change in where the aquifer areas are. It's just a cleaned up version that is a much smaller file size, so that when it's online and in other places and overlaid, it loads a lot faster for everybody. Is that?
That's exactly it. We went from 9 megabytes to 2, just to be able to, so I could zoom in and out to make sure, to find out if a street address was inside or outside of the zone. It just made life a lot easier. And in doing so, he brought it in line, he being our GIS person in SRPC, brought the look of it in line with the way we're doing maps right now. So there's no changes to the substance of it. It was just the coloring of it, and basically bringing the file size down.
So there's nothing really for the zoning on that one. It would be more of the planning board holding a public hearing, I think, to readopt a map. I believe is the process for that. But that's why that item is on there. Same thing, similar to the zoning map that has been online. It was kind of a mislabel, that the town center district was labeled as commercial instead of being labeled as town center district, or town center district. So that's another one we're looking to just clean up and correct. It's been mislabeled for quite some time. It looks like that was just, again, a typo that occurred at some point.
Mr. Chair, do either of these items have a cost?
No, I believe we already have.
Oh, it's already done.
Yeah.
It's already done.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, the zoning map thing isn't done, but I'll get Jackson to do that. That won't be, yeah.
Okay.
So the only cost I could think of is, I don't know if there's a cost to reprint maps for the walls, the larger maps.
Yes, I don't know if we do that for you guys?
Yes.
Those have all been done
While
in the
ago.
past.
Okay, then I'll just double check with Jen how it is part of your contract.
Okay,
But that would be the only cost.
okay.
And
thank
maybe he charge an hour of time to do the work. Something like that.
Blair, do you know, who's the GIS person you said? What's his name?
Jackson?
When he's updating GIS, is he looking essentially at the same thing as what SRPC has as their published GIS? Like, I publicly have access to like, SRPC GIS that shows,
Yeah,
it's pretty much the state repository, plus I think you guys have kind of created this whole countywide, basically Stratford County plus Nottingham.
yeah.
Because I'm just noticing, I actually use it for work quite often, but, it's better than the state one, so
Oh,
you can bring that back.
Yeah.
But I'm just noticing that like where we show, it's actually kind of funny, if you look at the town of Lee, the whole thing's like aquifer. It's just if I look at my aquifer map here, it doesn't match what's available, like shaded on if I'm clicking the aquifer button on the GIS that I can access online.
Okay,
But I'm assuming he's creating this from a GIS software, so. I was just curious, I guess it's more of my curiosity is like, so this is coming from your GIS, those like limits of the aquifer. But is there any benefit, or how does that work when you guys then like update / make that information?
so just so I understand what you're saying, what's being shown on the zoning map
Yeah, the one right here, yeah, this one right here,
that
yeah.
isn't matching what's shown on the publicly available GIS.
At least, yeah, if I'm clicking the aquifer box, it's like
Yeah.
a purple hash.
Yep,
There's actually some areas on this hatched, which is also, I'm trying to avoid any confusion, because if like,
Of
an applicant
course.
goes here.
yeah.
Some people just go right to the GIS, and even though I think our regulation would say it's whatever's published in our documents.
And that's true.
But like
yeah.
I'm noticing, say for example, the big section of aquifer that we have pretty much along 152,
Yep,
there's like 2 little splotches of it north of downtown. Yeah, I don't, it just, this doesn't jive with the map, and I just figured it's something maybe he could look into. Cause I know you guys, you maintain both.
Do you think you can do just a quick like screenshot of
Yeah, I
both?
mean, I can screenshot
Just
this
send it
right
to-
here.
Send it
and
to
just-
Blair.
Yeah,
yeah, why don't you do that, and
Follow
I'll
up with it.
follow up with you.
yeah, that whole thing, but
not
this,
even-
I don't know
okay.
what pond it is.
This is going to be
Oh, is that-
Cedar Waters.
Gotcha.
That's Cedar Waters and that's not like.
Yeah, so,
I'll
Ian, if you can just do that.
screenshot this and send it to you, so he can see what I mean, I just wanna make sure, cause I don't want somebody to come and be like, well, I looked on the GIS, and I'm not even close, and they're dead center in the aquifer if you look at our zoning.
I agree, I don't know that answer, so I'll definitely follow up with him
And
on
I say that partially because this is the first place I would go if I was doing a project too.
that. I do it too with other
Yeah.
communities, I mean, it's,
Based upon the large maps that we're actually using in the offices that the public's coming into,
yeah,
I don't even believe it's close to this. Maps we're using is very out of date then.
okay.
So the large maps would be a real priority, because a lot of people don't have computers, they just come in and
Look at the
look at the
map.
wall.
Yeah, look at the wall.
So we'll do that as a follow-up,
Alright,
just to
yep,
double check,
I'll add it to my list.
make sure that we all
Are you talking the maps that go down the hallway?
Yeah, but we actually have one in our office. We have an aquifer district map in our office.
Different ones do we have in the building?
Well, I wonder, yeah, because one was reprinted within the last 10 years, which is the one on the wall, and the one that's online, but I don't know if that's the same one in there, but I think as a part of this, we should double check the data, and then make sure that everybody that needs a copy gets a copy.
Correct.
Any questions on any of that before we move on? My other goal tonight, I appreciate everybody's time, and we can have this go as long as it's beneficial to everyone. My goal was to have everybody out of here by 9, but again, it's open, so if we're having a great discussion, we can keep going.
Let's push back.
But I wanna make sure that, I honor everybody's time. Impact fees, this is just something to keep everybody aware of. It's the planning board's purview. But it's something that's on our agenda. Realistically, we're probably gonna put a request for proposal out in 2024, because the current impact fees, the last time they were reviewed was 5-6 years ago, by Bruce Mayberry, who's no longer, doing that. So we have found someone else that does those kind of reviews and assessments. There's a cost form, they're obviously, so for us, as a planning board, it's very reliant on the CIP and what's in there, so we're obviously gonna be looking at fire, since the fire bond was paid off. If there's anything coming up in the CIP or future planning that we're aware of, that will be utilized for that, otherwise we probably wouldn't put the fire out to bid, because we'd most likely zero that one out. We don't currently have police, recycling, highway, as impact fees, but we do have the capability of adding impact fees for those, if there's anything identified in the CIP for that. So if anybody hears, his budget starts to move into, move in the fall, or the CIP gets going, if the department heads are looking to propose any kind of items in there that would potentially qualify for a CIP,
Just
for
to,
impact fees.
since we're talking about that, the highway department would be something that would probably be more beneficial for an impact fee if we get it, because of the facility that's sitting over there. There's no room for anybody to stay, there's no, not gonna say, there's no, like when the guys go plowing, you know, and they're here all 24, 36 hours, there's no place for them to even sit. I mean, they gotta sit in their trucks, there's nothing,
Yep.
there's no place for, no, not even any little area to have lunch or to sit down, or a couch, I mean, you know, or like what's called a break room over in that facility, there's,
And it's next to the river, which I know has been a,
well, right too, but then there's also the ability with what to do with the sand pit that we have down there, and the amount of land that's down there for adding on structures or doing stuff down there, since it's limited to what we could do there.
What's the down there, the one that's on smoke?
Down there's on Flutter.
Flutter.
Flutter, and then we have Smoke Street.
So were you talking about smoke having space?
Well, Smoke Street has tons of space, it's
Well,
huge.
that's the one you were talking about then.
Well,
Okay.
if we're gonna-
Cause you pointed in both
Well, I
directions.
said if the chance of, you know, adding stuff that we need down there.
Down there being Smoke Street.
Right.
Okay.
'Cause like we have the coverings where we do right now for the salt and the sand and stuff like this, but,
Correct.
you know, there could be another area too where we talk about adding a wash bay or something down there for the fact of the trucks keeping them clean, getting the salt off them, which is preventive maintenance.
Right.
You know, which is beneficial for our equipment.
Right.
You know, we don't have that facility, but, you know, if we had this in the, as impact fees to spend money on, cause you gotta spend something on something new. It can't be just redoing something, it's gotta be a new structure, new things, and there's talk. Not saying it's anything happening, but this is where money could possibly go, if we decide that impact fees are available to put to a different department. There's a lot of potential for impact fees to be spent well
Yeah.
with the highway department.
Don't impact fees have to go to something that is needed as a result of the growth though?
growth or planned growth, yeah, like the fire station, you know, we had a fire station obviously, and
Right.
built a new one, and that's why it's proportionate share, there's, you know, it's not 100% going to, as impact fees, it's a proportion of the total cost that gets calculated into impact fees.
So if we looked at the needs for the highway department, and I agree with you, I think them and the recycling center both need to be considered for impact fees. I'm not sure about police, that would be something to talk to Chief Woodman about. But for the highway department, if we looked at the need for more vehicles or different vehicles or something for the
Or better
increase in roads,
storage
then it would
for-
be storage for them, and we could go that way for
Yeah, we got our
them.
excavator sitting outside that's sitting not undercover. We have equipment that's sitting outside that's not undercover. That's sitting over at the facility over here. There's no sense bringing it over, there's no coverage to stamp it either, but you could build a structure, cause we're growing for. It would space to
Yeah, and
do
just
so.
planning for the future
But the-
increase.
The recycling center too. In fact, there's plenty of work that can be
Needs
upgraded.
because of the
that needs
increase
for
in the
growing,
people.
absolutely.
So, yeah, but we just have to be careful, from what I understand, about the way the thing is worded.
Correct.
To make sure that it gets covered under the impact fees, but you're right, I think those two departments are.
But again, if we're gonna cut out the fire for the 800, I mean, every little bit that you can find to go to a department's gonna make a difference.
Yeah, and that's, again, that's why, the other reason we've outsourced this in the past to professionals that are more live in the world of doing impact fee reviews and assigning them. You know, we contract so that it's not just us coming up with numbers, it's someone that's involved in that. And will give us a nice report back, explaining the thought process on it and how they came up with everything. So that's a kind of a live issue that I expect will have more traction in 2024. There's nothing in the budget this year to be able to do, to outsource this year, for third-party review.
Did that guy ever get back to you?
Yep.
Did you say that?
Yeah, I talked to him.
Do we need to get that number though before, because it needs to be put in this fall into like the budget we actually?
I'll talk to him again. It's kind of tough, because when you put it out, you know, I don't know if this has to go out to bid. That's something I'd talk to the town administrator about, if we have to do a request for proposal and send it out to bid.
It depends on the
Or
amount of money.
If it, you know, if we can get a ballpark, which we could probably get from other towns that have done them, if we can't get it directly from the individual. The problem is, my understanding, there's just not many people that do the impact fee assessments, and, you know, in the past, it was Bruce Mayberry. You know, you could talk to any town, who did yours? Bruce Mayberry, it's like one person, and I believe he's retired, so. But I'll definitely follow up on that piece of it, to make sure we kind of have an idea of a pretty solid number. My guess is it's probably gonna be in the 5,000 range, because of the number that we have, it could be more.
Board of Selectmen is only 5,000.
Yeah, and again, it would depend what number falls into what he's gonna say for
Just
extras or.
because we have to do the current ones, plus any new ones that we're gonna add. The next item is more housekeeping. It's just for us to remember, we have, in the zoning, there's some subsections within the zoning that are just kind of misnumbered. Like if you read them, you know, you'll have letter C, and then it says, you know, is subsequent to these conditions. But then it's D, E, F, G, instead of that, those should be sub items, so it should be C, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath that. So there's really nothing there, that's not, that we need to spend time on tonight. Our applications, subdivision site plan review applications, we're looking to make some changes on cleaning up, trying to figure out the number of plan sets that are really needed to try to, A, eliminate all the stuff that comes into the land use office and all the waste. There's a lot of cost to applicants for that as well, you know, landowners here, if their engineers printing out, you know, 15 sets of plans, that are 20 pages each, there's quite a bit of cost involved in that, and especially each time they revise it, so.
Submission.
We're looking at trying to make that, sure, you know, again, we don't want the town footing the bill of anything, meaning that, you know, the land use clerk is getting stuck making copies or doing anything like that. That shouldn't happen, but there's a balance, so we're gonna change that, and then we need to update the subdivision regs accordingly. And part of that will be requiring or requesting that the applicants include an electronic version in PDF format with all applications and plans. So, yep, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt, I just want to highlight something different.
Sure.
Before we leave zoning,
Yep,
at your convenience.
of course, yeah, fire away.
We had a case specific to Article 3E3, which is the Aquifer District protection, and it has to do with how many animals are allowed. And did that get into the agenda?
Yeah, it's towards the end,
It's
so
toward the
we
end.
didn't put it in the zoning, but that's, we had it under other.
It's on the second page of your agenda. on the bottom.
But we can talk about that now, that's fine, that's, we would.
I guess,
So,
I turn into a pumpkin at 8 for other personal reasons, but, I guess, if
No,
you wanna talk about it, I'm willing.
it's totally fine, it's zoning related, so why not? So anywhere that we can add clarity, I think is always good without making our documents overly robust. You know, there's been some warrant articles we've had before where something was very spelled out, but it became a 6-page zoning item. So we're trying to be cognizant of that, but things like definitions, those are easy enough. So anywhere it's not defined, I believe, it, you know, technically goes to RSA's if there's a definition. If there's not, then it goes to a dictionary, which dictionary do you have? So this came up, basically, my understanding was there was a zoning case that happened to be an aquifer district in,
Are we talking about that, or you just jumped from where you were talking about before?
I jumped, because it was part, we had
I'm
zoning.
still thinking about what you're talking about
Yeah,
before.
so I think we can have that as a takeaway for the planning board for a future work session as we look at warrant articles to potentially add a definition, clarify what that means in that particular portion
For the farm animals?
within the aquifer protection district, yeah.
There's a lot of
Because we restrict it, but we don't specify.
Well, we don't restrict it that much, because I was at that meeting, and there was a lot of, back and talk about what's this, or how many of this, or what could go there, and it was a, I mean, a lot of good points on both sides. I felt for you guys on the board, because I sat there listening, going, well, that sounds right. Then you sit there and go, well, that sounds right too, because you obviously want to keep agriculture. This is Nottingham, but, you know, very difficult on how we have it written to say what is actually right or wrong for, and besides the aquifer protection, but, I mean, this guy didn't have a lot that was very big, and he's talking about having 3 pigs or whatever that could breed to have 8 pigs over, and then maybe 2 cows, and you're sitting there, and the people are worried about the runoff from the manure going down, and it was a whole, you know, because the lot size wasn't big, and.
Yeah, so there, you know, I don't wanna get into too much of the.
No, but I'm just telling you what, you weren't there, I'm just telling you because you didn't see it.
And that's the thing, right? So, I mean, you can zone it, and then there's gonna be a bunch of other pieces that get pulled in. I mean, there's RSA's with agriculture, you know, that might, you know, we might restrict it, but they might untie our hands or tie our hands, you know, then there's, you know, someone that's an aquifer protection district that has a 20-acre lot that wants to have 10 animals versus someone that's aquifer protection district that, you know, has just a pre-existing non-conforming, you know, half-acre lot. And then you get into different things with health and, I don't mean to point you, but you wear the health hat. So, you know, with health and code, that is, I have no idea about, but where you have a certain number of density of animals on a certain size land, that could create a different issue of how do you handle manure and all those things.
Wells.
So,
The problem with the ordinance, it always says like 5 animals, so it's like really vague.
Well, what's 5
Right,
animals?
and
Like
it-
5 chickens is way
Well, I
different than
mean,
5 cows.
5 cows would equal, in the waste would equal like 1,000 chickens, so I mean, it's really.
That's
vague.
vague.
Doesn't say-
And now it's part of the
Yeah, it needs
discussion,
a
it's so
little
tough.
more,
Yeah.
and it's not a big issue, because I mean, in all the years I've been on the ZBA.
Right.
It's the only time I've ever even seen it come up.
Yeah.
I'm more worried we're going back to the other subject, because
I guess, yeah, you know,
One
it didn't say
suggestion.
farm animals, it just said animals to me, that's cut and dry, it's,
but is there a
it's
path,
an animal, it's.
is there a path to better define this?
So
Yeah.
my recommendation would, you know, I shouldn't say recommendation, a suggestion to consider is perhaps think of it outside of a definition, trying to define animals and define this. Think about just saying, okay, these number of animals, these number of animals, these number of animals.
Right, 4-legged, 2-legged, you can at least part that pretty easy.
Yeah, bovine versus birds, things like that. I mean, however you want to do it, but it doesn't, an animal has a definition, and I don't think what we're trying to get at is a definition-related thing. I always try to tell people, don't regulate through your definitions, as minimal as possible. Try to keep your regulations in, your definitions are just to clarify what a word is. So, maybe the regulation needs to be changed and updated to reflect these conversation points, but I just don't think it's a definition.
The alternative is to leave it as is and do it by individual
Right, exactly.
basis and debate every time it comes up. So,
Oh, I mean that, yeah, you could do it that way, take it on a case-by-case scenario, but you like to have parameters, cause it makes it sort of,
I did a little bit of survey, just a little bit, but, you know, a farm usually has more than one type of animal, at 4 to 5 types. And, if they're big, 4-legged animals, there's sometimes 2-legged animals. And then, you know, how would you divide that up between 5 animals?
Let's use the term
it's sort of-
animals. A dog's an animal, you could have 5 dogs. Now, is that considered out there too?
In the other document that.
Does it say in there
that
to
this
specify dogs and
that
cats?
this pointed us to, those were, I'll say not part of the farm animal definition. But you're
I didn't-
absolutely
I
right,
just-
kennels and such, but, so. So there was a suggestion made by a couple farmers that I sort of mixed, but, you know, if you had, there were 5 large animals. If you had chickens, there would be 3 and 20 chickens, and there was sort of like a division of how much would be sort of acceptable on a normal small farm, so. And I presented that at the time, it's just as a suggestion from a couple of local farmers.
And you could go that step further of, you know, do you do a density thing instead, where it's based on the amount of land and create like a scale?
Yes, yes.
So I think
Okay.
that's something the planning board will take away and make sure that when we get into warrant article season, that's something we look at,
Thank you.
for possible inclusion. Let's just go back, subdivision, site plan, subdivision updates, requiring PDF version or requesting a PDF version. Almost every time, that's what the applicant's working off of anyway, so it allows, much easier for the land use clerk if they get that, so they're not scanning plans, which then degrades the quality oftentimes anyway, takes up a lot of time, makes the files much larger, whereas if we get a PDF format, it can be distributed by email to the board members as well as posted online for the public, much easier too. And there's really not any additional cost to the applicant for most applications that we see.
Would this be the time to ask about the fees that we do for subdivisions?
I think I had that later, but that's fine.
Okay, no, I'm just asking, I mean, because with the price of inflation, the price of everything else going up, I mean,
I had that spreadsheet.
you know, the fees, I don't know last time we adjusted those to meet today's industry, because it doesn't seem like anything's slowing down building in this town, so I don't see why
That's for sure.
a little extra money given to the town for fees wouldn't be a,
Thankfully, the board doesn't control the fees, the select board does, but.
well, I'm just,
But that is something.
I'm just bringing it up as general.
We will, that's something we've discussed, and, you know, I'm happy to keep this kind of free-flowing. Fees in general, we've talked about that a number of times at the planning board level, to see if we should make recommendations to the select board to consider changing some fees to stay in line with other towns. Again, we're not trying to make anything so cost prohibitive that people can't submit applications to us.
No, but you can take the thing for
But we wanna make sure that the
250
town
or-
isn't losing out. There's a lot of cost to these boards. The boards are all volunteer, we're elected, but none of us, on the planning board or ZBA or the Concom receive any kind of compensation for this, but our support roles that are extremely necessary, Alana, the land use clerk, our contract with SRPC, those do have costs that the town.
Sitting right there.
The town, Dale, sorry, didn't mean to leave you out. Our building inspector, code enforcement, and a number of others that are involved in these processes obviously do have a cost. So, you know, some of that is the town's burden to shoulder, but we wanna make sure there's a proportionate share and that we're not absorbing all of an applicant's cost either, so. My thoughts on it, we're potentially, you know, billing out our contracted hours, so if a plan comes in, we set a fee for a number of hours based on if it's a major subdivision, it's gonna require an escrow of a certain dollar amount. A lot of towns do $5,000 if it's a major subdivision or a major site plan. And our contract planners' hours are basically billed back to them, so we get the bill, but we then take from that to offset the cost there. I think that's something that other towns have done and done successfully, so that's probably one of the first things we could start doing. But that would be us recommending some to the select board and then figuring out.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Just something for consideration if you're looking at fees. If you were to sell your home, if you build a new house, you're gonna get an impact fee. It's $5,364.
Yep.
If you sell your house, we're not gonna charge an impact fee to the new person buying it, obviously. There's no new impact to the town. Where I think some clarification would be helpful is on the business side. If you have a business and there's an impact fee and there's a change in use, does that require an impact fee or not? So from my point of view, it's difficult. Let's say you have a farm stand. They sell a couple tomatoes a year. And I'm being obviously to the extreme, and a box store comes in on the same location. Do I charge them an impact fee? Or was there already a business there? It's very difficult to, and I actually have a case like that going on right now, not to that extreme, but what triggers an impact fee on a commercial site? I would ask you to look at that.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, or is it proportionate so that, you know, if the existing was 100 square feet, you know, and
That's giving me too much power to make that decision.
and they're going to 2,000 square feet, because the commercial side is, there's no school piece, it's fire, which is, and what's the other one? So it's based on square footage, so.
Is it square footage, or is it change of use, or is it both?
Right.
I would ask that you clarify that.
Yep.
Wouldn't it, I mean, we could also look at small business versus a larger business. If you're talking big box store, that's a major business versus a small farm stand.
But where do you draw the line when it's a medium business to a medium business, it's a little bit bigger? You know, for me, it's, yes, that's obvious in that case, but what do I have to go by in writing a rule? You know, is it, you know, if you go back to the home, we've already paid our impact fees. Why do we have to pay impact fees? It was already a business here.
Even if you tear down the home and rebuild the home, it doesn't get a second impact fee.
Right, because there's no new impact on the community.
Right.
You had people here before, you have people here now. The business is gonna say, well, there was a business here before. They had 2 employees, now we have 500. Well, there is an impact,
Yes.
but where do I draw the line? Clarification on that would be helpful.
Yeah, in that, since we're talking about that, the fees and when they're, that was something I thought we should make sure we have an understanding of, or everybody does, is, I think some things have happened in the background and like, you know, the board's been oblivious to it, or it just happened, you know, so is, who assesses the impact fees and when are they collected? You know, I think right now, the burden gets placed on the building inspector, code enforcement, when a, building permits pulled or COs pulled, requested. But it's not at the time of subdivision or the time of plan approval. And I don't know what towns, most towns do, if they wait until something actually goes to get built and that's when they do it, or they do it at the time of an approval.
I would love for you to say that you're gonna do it and take more work off me and put it on you, but I don't think that's fair to the applicant. You have a subdivision, and I'll use Maple Ridge, for example. Maple Ridge, the majority of the houses went up in a year or two. There was one lot that, for whatever reason, it was 3 years later, 4 years later, that the person finally decided to build. So why would we charge them an impact fee at subdivision when there's no new impact to the town? Unfortunately, I feel that it should stick with me, and you charge them when there's an impact to the town. The impact is when they get the CO.
Yeah.
That's how it's done presently.
Yeah.
That's how we're doing it presently.
That's, okay, make,
There's no new impact.
just how you
until-
worded it, I just wanna make sure we were clear that that's,
Converse of it, the planning side of it for the town and budgeting is the town may have to start, you know, a certain number of houses that, or development that gets approved. The town may have to say, okay, well, we have all this planned that's out there, we're gonna need an extra fire engine, increase the size of the fire station for that fire engine, new police, whatever, because there's 300 new lots that are gonna come online at some point. You know, so it's, but I'm fine with however it's done, it's just, I wanna make sure that we understood and that it's, we're doing it correct, or we're doing it
I guess I would
appropriately, and we're not,
argue-
and we're not missing it at this level of requiring that as part of the notice of decision, that impact fees must be paid for if it's being handled handled currently in that manner. These are just application cleanups, so it was, street name approval form not included in current application. I don't know if we need that, because we don't approve street names, the select board does.
Select board does, right?
So I don't know if having that in there would be helpful or not. You know, we could definitely include it, but say that we make sure that it's notarized, it's pushed to the select board.
Maybe just have an area where there's a sign off on it, so we know that step's not skipped.
Right. I think that's helpful. Conditional use permits, we're gonna probably include some kind of verbiage at the top that you may have to pay for notification. So basically that comes up as someone provides us with an application, they don't apply for a conditional use permit at the time of application, they decide some point during the process that they wanna seek a conditional use permit, well, that's considered like a substantive change. And I believe our advice from council was that if it's something that can be considered as changing the actual application or the scope of it, that re-notification actually occur. So abutters would have to get re-notified, specifically mentioning the CUP application. So we're just trying to make it clear to both the applicants and then to the board that depending on when that gets applied for, they may be subject to re-notification and then, you know, a continued hearing. We're reevaluating the application. Our goal is to kind of shorten it. In general, we're trying to make our applications a little bit easier for everybody. Maybe create a one-page with basic property project application, but allow them to attach more information, which is pretty common with towns. Different permits, let's see, conditional use permits, we have several different types right now, but I think we only have one CUP application. So we have open space that mentions a requirement for a CUP, wetlands, which potentially have two separate permits, and the Aquifer Protection District. So Blair, I believe the thought on that is to create potentially either subsections or separate sections for CUP to
Yeah, you know, I wrote it down this way as like creating separate applications or different permits, but, you know, we have, if we think that it's gonna, we can write it in a way where we can ask sort of questions that would be germane to all of them, then it would be a simple one where you just have 3 different options across the top and you just check which one you're doing. But if we find in getting into it that, no, we want to hear different things for each one, then maybe you have to have separate actual applications, so that you're asking different questions.
Yeah, so I think we'll the planning board will handle that one. It'll be trying to just clarify, again, it's just, there's a lot of stuff that's moving out there that we're working on. This is not getting shorter. It seems we tick some stuff off and then we add a bunch of new things. Design review application, I believe, added a description for what the design review is and added a butters list form. So that's just housekeeping, so we'll move on. Current list of appendices in each regulatory document, site plan regulations, there's some cleanup that we need, roads in Nottingham.
Changed.
Well, there's that, so we need to make sure our lists are correct, both with road names and private versus town versus emergency lane. And then there's some other references, which is in the subdivision regulations, that the map listing is wrong. It's actually the 911 maps, not the tax maps, so we need to convert those over.
Okay.
We still have a list of pre-approved future road names. That was something, trying to guide applicants to use names that the town likes versus the, you know, developer's child, wife, other child, you know, nephew, niece, grandmother. It's names that fit better within the town. So there was some names that were previously approved by the select board and already went through 911, to make sure they were fit, and those were solicited from the town and citizens to come up with those names. A map of fire cistern and dry hydrants. So nothing there.
I had a question about
Yep.
this. You know, what's the reasoning for having a map of the fire cisterns and dry hydrants in either one of these regulatory documents.
I think it's more for when applicants going through it, they can see that, and then, because it's gonna be a piece that, might help them gauge
If you're,
the fire department.
and if you're also doing a 3-lot subdivision and there's a cistern that's already there, that's within X amount of feet from your 3-lot subdivision, now you don't need to actually put in your cistern, or your cistern, but you already use sprinkler system in your house either, because there's already an apparatus
It's also an
that's
insurance
there.
thing, people sometimes need to know where they are relative for insurance.
So I mean, not like you can't miss the thing, it's right there if you're gonna see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Not like they're hidden, but
Yeah, gotcha.
They don't usually count for insurance, but they're not pressurized.
Okay.
Oh, really?
They don't count as fire protection. Because they are non-pressurized. Or that's what I've been advised before. Zoning ordinance, no pendencies, we talked about potentially moving them out of the documents and making them separate documents, to avoid conflicts between them. We'll discuss that more.
Okay.
I wanna keep going into stuff that's more germane to everybody. Fee review, we talked about some of that. Again, some of the fees, the town kind of absorbs right now, recording of plans. Right now, it can be the applicant records the plans themselves, or the land use clerk does it, but the land use clerk doesn't, the town doesn't get compensated for land use clerk's time for the drive to Concord, the mileage, any of that. There's just a $75 fee, which is actually the registry fee. We can require that the applicant record their plans. The benefit of that is obviously, you know, they can get it done, they can get it recorded as quickly as they have it signed. They absorb all the cost of it. The downside is, there's that one piece of control that whatever document we just signed and took from here is getting through a third party to the registry. You know,
The other thing, having been to the registry when they're bringing them, if they see anything when it's brought there that they don't accept,
Yep.
then at least Alana would be able to speak to what that is, where an applicant may go, I don't know, they just didn't like something on this page.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen where they either didn't like someone's signature, or they didn't like where this particular thing was placed, so
Lines
it
through a
really,
word.
correct, it really would make more sense, I think, to keep it within the, building
Then we should
office.
raise that fee in order to compensate.
Or.
Oh, absolutely,
For it, yeah.
absolutely.
It's $75 registry fee, right, which is the registry fee. There's no compensation to the town for actual mileage and stuff, so that would be one where I think we should.
But then we take the option, by doing that, we are taking the option away of the applicant doing it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I can reach out to council to see if there's any
not uncommon, though.
limitation,
I'm just,
Right, yeah.
you know, and having not lived in that world, you know.
I'm sure a lot of people,
I
would
don't
it's
know
$100
if
would be happy for let us run it, and then don't have to waste their
Just
time
gonna say,
doing it.
for convenience sake, I'm sure most people would be
Just pay the 100 and say,
perfectly
see ya.
happy to have somebody else do it.
I mean, some guys can't get financing until it's recorded, so if they are waiting on someone else, there is that component. You know, do we lose any enforcement mechanism if it's not recorded?
That's what I don't know. And then the other piece of it, you know, Alana's in waiting for them to either give her the registry number, plan number, book and page, something. Or waiting, you know, looking for it online to show up, to make sure that we can finalize our stuff in the office, so there's that piece, but I don't know if we lose.
From an enforcement side, I don't think, Dale, you can't write a permit, and the town can't like give tax map IDs until they see a recorded plan anyway. So in theory, somebody doesn't have a lot to pull a permit on, like say an individual house lot, until it's a recorded plan.
On a subdivision, but even a bigger problem with that is something I deal with on a daily basis is when somebody comes in down the road and wants to do something different, not on the initial subdivision, but if there's a recorded plat, then we have to honor that and follow that. It's almost a get out of jail free card for certain aspects of zoning, certain aspects. But if they don't have that plat and it's not recorded, it causes a lot more problems for us and more for the applicant or a future applicant down the road, you know, if they don't have that plat, and then a planning board never officially ruled on it, was recorded, it didn't happen.
Yeah,
And that
we
becomes
expire at
a,
that point, yeah.
you know, that's the first place that we go to, and I'm not even talking on new stuff, but when somebody wants to come in and they wanna do something and they wanna get out of, or they wanna expand their property, the first place we go to is see if they have a plat, and if it's not recorded. So it really is very important that that does get done.
Yeah, say a minor subdivision for someone they're thinking of their family in the future, and they do it, and then we say, well, you gotta record this, and they never do, but we've signed off on it, they've got the Mylar.
Then we're,
Recorded, you know,
we haven't done our due diligence then.
yeah, so, that's my only concern, is if there's a, you know, I wanna make sure that the town's compensated appropriately for it, for the land use clerk's time, and the mileage and everything, but I don't wanna give up that piece cause that is an important piece to make sure that.
Can it be that you just give them an option with a timeline and say, if you don't do it within 3 weeks, we will automatically do it?
No,
Maybe something like
They would
that.
have the Mylar, if we hand them the Mylar, we wouldn't have any more,
Yep.
so so we'd be in trouble.
Ed, staying on fees too, so I've obviously done that spreadsheet where I compared some of the surrounding towns.
Yep.
And then basically with that, we can create a column. The idea is they're ultimately giving the board of selectmen recommendations on like, do we increase, or like, some of them.
Yep.
What's interesting is actually like Nottingham is the only town I've found that surrounds us that has a requirement for site plans that differs between the acreage of the site plan. And it's like, you add square footage. Everybody else just does it based off of like residential, commercial, and then your square footage calculation. But that's why I think sometimes our site plan fees come in quite a bit lower than surrounding towns, so. Yeah, I mean, it's basically, for example, if I had a 10,000 square foot commercial building in the town of Dover, in the city of Dover, it's, at least $1,500 for an application fee for a site plan on commercial. Durham would be $700, Epping $800, Rochester $1,800. So you can kind of see the trend, the cities
More.
who also have more planning staff as well, that they're thinking of that portion of it too, but. We don't see very many site plan applications, so it's probably not a super big deal, but I think this goes more to like what you talked about of escrowing third-party reviews instead of how we do it now, where we're basically green lighting and pass the bill on.
Which is dangerous.
Yeah, like these places, all of them actually, you need to escrow the money ahead of time before they'll even green light the review.
Yeah, and especially, and we don't do it for everything, for true third-party review of our engineering firms. You know, we're pretty good about trying to do what we can in-house, but we know with major subdivisions, the technicality that goes into it, you know, it's created by engineers, it's, and everything else, and wetland scientists and such. The same thing with major site plans, that, you know, the expertise may not be with our circuit rider or with SRPC. Also, we don't wanna eat up all of our contract hours for reviewing of one plan, so, we usually put that out to a third-party engineering firm. The last two I've seen have been about 5,000, for the complexity of them. And other towns usually do that, require escrow upfront to cover those costs. And that would be part of what I think we would suggest to be added on with the select board, is requiring for certain conditions, so minor subdivisions, you know, lot line adjustments, things that probably aren't gonna require a ton of technical review or time, either would have a very small, either an increased fee or a small, amount. Major subdivisions, site plans, major site plans would have, say, a $5,000 escrow, and I think that's been what I've seen neighboring towns do. I think we came up with that, but, we don't have to go through all that tonight. It's just something that I think the planning board is gonna be recommending in the next couple of months, to the select board to consider adding. And then once we do, we do have our fees online, which meets the RSA requirement. We would just make sure again that gets changed as well. Master plan update, we're behind on that. We had a major overhaul on that a decade ago. It's definitely time for that again, so we're potentially looking at doing a budget item for that in 2024. And we've had thoughts about if, and I don't even know if it's allowed, but how we kind of create funds for, you know, the cyclical reassessment in town, or other things where, you know, every year, there's a budget item, or warrant article for, say, $1,000, $2,000, some dollar amount for cyclical re-engagement of the master plan update, so, because realistically, the master plan is our guiding document for the land use boards in the community, and it's supposed to be created by the community, so getting community engagement is a big piece of that, and, you know, I think we all see it probably on the land use boards, unless you're in a butter to something, the engagement is difficult. So, trying to figure out a way to make sure that as we do updates, that A, they're getting done, and B, we're trying to engage as many people as possible for input on those to help guide us as we write those documents or amend those documents. So, call out there for, master plan update volunteers, we'll be looking for that, early 2024. I'll move into the first thing on here, there's been.
How do we figure the cost for that?
Master plan update?
Yeah.
Kind of look at what other towns have done for budgeted for it or had for updates.
Who are we
Reaching out.
contacting for that?
Probably regional planning commissions would be a big piece of it, which I know they may be the one that get the, potentially are the ones that are engaged for it, so might create a conflict there, but, also just reaching out to local planners for some of the communities around us and seeing what they expended if they've done an update.
Well, you talk about 2024, and I say this because the fact that budget season is upon us in a matter of, yeah, I mean, I was gonna say a month and a half, but I mean, the first meeting is in October, so I guess maybe it's not even that, so this number needs to be at least somewhat solidified of what it might be, so that it can be put in there to be discussed on where it goes.
So the town of Stratford just did a full master plan.
We done that, yeah.
They did all the chapters, so you could reach out to them. We did it, yes, but you can do it. Also, because of the RSAs, the regional planning bodies can be hired without, going out to bid, right? We're exempt from that, so it's an option, right? So you can talk to Stratford. Barrington, I just did their land use plan, right? So just one chapter, and then we're gonna be doing their housing chapter, and we're just kind of every year doing a chapter. A lot of communities do it that way, because it's a lot to bite off to do a full master plan, no matter how big your community is, right? It's a lot. So those are the two primary ways. Sometimes, like for Barrington, we did land use and transportation at the same time. It just happened to be that way. So you could do a couple of chapters if you wanted to, that ones that you think are similar, or something like that. And then, like I said, Stratford did the whole thing, so reach out to somebody there if you wanna find out what they paid and, you know, how it went and that sort of thing.
Right.
So those are kind of the two big options for that. And there's a lot of housing money out there right now, right? So, your housing chapter could probably it'd probably be pretty easy to get a grant, right? They have that, Invest New Hampshire money right now that's specific to housing, so, but there's stipulations that go across that you have to do a lot with public engagement if you take that money, so it's more than what's normally asked of you, so there's almost like a separate chapter, but
Yeah.
just an FYI.
In my personal opinion, is that's the side that I think if we just
What do you mean by personal
Do it.
engagement?
is getting the.
Public engagement. Sorry.
Right, sorry, yeah, but what
They
is-
require you to like do so many more meetings.
It's
very
far
laid
more,
out.
it's far more robust what the expectation is.
So you don't have like more volunteers needed or more?
Town meetings.
I think making multiple different touches with people, trying to engage them either online with like a survey, trying to do
I
a,
got you, I know.
yeah.
I know what you're
Like
talking
even
about.
if you're a.
It's almost like I think you have to create a plan and then implement the plan and then do the housing plan,
The
right?
whole point is like the Invest in H two, they're collecting all this information. If you're a private developer and you've received one of the Invest in H grants, a requirement of you receiving a loan is you have to provide, like, there's 10 points. You have to provide like a detailed update on your project every single month to them, and they keep tabs, and like, there's a lot of self-reporting even on the private side too. It's kinda like, they tie up the money, be like, yeah, but you're gonna, just so you know, you're gonna have a lot more paperwork you gotta.
Yeah, in my opinion, so my
But
goal
you're
is,
getting all the
A, make sure it gets done. The last revision was major, and it was, you know, amazing what it went from to what it went to for formatting and everything else. So big kudos to the prior master plan update committee, and all those individuals that took part in that. So make sure that it gets done, and then make sure that we actually get, or try to get as much engagement as possible from the public on it. And I think we're limited as boards to how do we go about that, whereas if you kind of contract with somebody that's more involved in the community outreach part of it, you know, those pieces come along, you know. So under other, any other warrant articles request to consider? So there's been mention, of looking at a temporary moratorium on building permits and subdivision site plans and a growth moratorium. There's RSA specific to those and to what they require. It's not like we can just say we don't want this anymore. There's criteria and I think costs involved to get studies and things of that nature to support that. But, you know, I guess I just wanna make sure that we had this on the agenda and to gauge kind of interest, input from everyone, you know, as to, do we spend time on it, as a warrant article? Begin that process, you know, what's it look like, and everything else, so.
Well, Dale, how many, I know that we've got, but before the planning board, 2 at least, right? The 2 big subdivisions?
We have one that's in process, one's a design review, those are both 20+ lots, I think. Those are 2 together, plus we've had a few 7 lots and multiple lots this year.
Right, this year alone. Do you see any others, or have there been any others, you or Alana?
What are you asking, subdivisions?
Correct. Yeah, well, building within the town, the subdivisions, 20 lots or greater.
Well, we have the 2 that the chair spoke of. We just had 7 over on Stevens Hill. And then we have several, 2 or 3 going on, several 2-3 lots going on. For last year, we just did it today, we had 22, not completed, but 22 new building permits for new homes last year, but that does not include condominiums or ADUs. So on average, we just cleaned up a lot of them, and as you get through a lot, there's a summer, that always happens as summer goes along, a lot of building. We're closing out about 40 new homes a year or so. That's a rough number.
But that is, we're gonna exceed that in 2024
It's
based
very
on,
confusing because we have building permits going back to 21. People take a long time to build it, so it's very confusing to say you have this many homes, it's 40, because we may have issued, we did a lot this year, we did a lot of COs this year, but that doesn't mean some of the building permits may have been open in 21, 22, 23. So it's very confusing to say that we have 40 new homes coming in a year.
Kinda usually have to look at new issues, new permits issued per year, that's what usually.
Probably the best way of doing it to get an average is to look at your certificate of occupancies and your impact fees that come in.
That's what I was at, yeah. That makes more sense.
And we just did today, we just did it, so for 22, as I said, there was 20 new homes that got COs. That's not true, there were 20 new permits applied for, plus all the condominiums and the ADUs. So, on average, without the subdivisions, because my first few years here, we didn't have major subdivisions, but as you just said, we have 2 potential ones of 20+ coming in. But just for single-family homes, you could say between 20 and 30 new homes a year would be fair.
so if you take between 20 and 30, we'll go with 25. And then you add on the 2 subdivisions with 20 each, that's 40, so we're looking at 65 new homes,
Potentially.
potentially, in 1 year. With
That's what they
new,
all hit at one time, yeah.
but that's new roads, that's more kids, that's bigger on the fire department, that's more on the police department. I'm the one who brought this up because I'm looking at this growth to the town, and I just think that our infrastructure isn't there to support all this extra growth. Especially when we have a fire department that's down three people because one of them is leaving and going to Durham. And we've got nobody as the head of the works department there, the roads group. You just mentioned, but we don't currently.
No, I'm not, I wasn't, so we're in the works of getting someone, but okay.
Yeah, we are, but we still don't currently have it. And you've already mentioned at the BOS meeting, all of the issues going on with the, recycling center. So I just think if we're having all of these people come into the town, adding burden to what is already a burden for our infrastructure, we need to look at it.
We're also hiring a police department too.
Well, I get it, but it's,
throwing out some else.
we're still then adding more to an already burdened base. And I think we need to, and this building is another thing that needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate you being here, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
That are supposed to alleviate the burden. That's the whole idea of them.
Except that the impact coming is, at this point, far exceeding what we're collecting on impact fees in order to be able to make a,
So maybe they need to go up.
The impact fees, if you, I mean, you can go, it's right here and there. Out of the $5,600 impact fees, $4,300 goes to the school. So for the infrastructure that she's talking about, the impact fee is only $1,200.
it doesn't even cover a cop, or I mean, a police officer, or, it's
not
nobody's salary.
based towards,
Right, so that's,
Infrastructure more than town.
but that's where that part comes in, you know, where do we add in impact fees, police, highway, any others that we don't have?
and they won't, those
But-
fees don't.
But, you know, the RSA limits us as to where, you know, what you can do with those and how they're used. So we need to have an understanding of what's planned, and that goes back to, you know, how's the town planning for this, if it's, you know, we know we're gonna have to, and I don't necessarily know you can use it for adding personnel, you know you need an extra, police officer or an extra firefighter personnel, you know, for the additional capacity that we have. I don't think you can use it for that piece of it. I think it tends to be more of like physical infrastructure, and, you know, and equipment that's being added, not, unfortunately.
Well, and I think, based on what I read in the RSA, we certainly have a good argument for doing this. Sorry, the door is now closed and I'm getting. Great.
So Blair, and you probably don't have this data, 'cause I didn't ask for anything like this, I just thought about it. The CO thing was a good reference there, because I'm sure towns kind of track that. I don't know if anybody publishes it, but if we're doing 20-ish to 30 new COs a year, and our current housing stock is 2,000 plus, probably closer to 2,100, 2,200 now, I think. That's 1.5% growth. I don't know what we're at,
Well,
you know.
you can
compared
also,
to-
I mean, there's two sides of every coin. There's a housing shortage. There's only 5 houses for sale in this whole town right now. So these 40 houses that are being built, they're all gonna sell, because there's no houses in town.
Already sold.
You know, so I mean, there's one of your major problems, whether, you know, they build 100 or 12, I mean, there's not enough, we haven't even started to like work for I mean, these houses are $600,000, these new houses and these new developments that are coming in, they're not coming in at 300.
Right, there's no workforce.
Just to compare apples to apples too, just because you have 20 to 30 new homes does not mean you have 20 to 30 new properties. People tear down their homes and rebuild on the same spot too. So you may not have, that number may not be as large as it appears. You may have 5 to 10 demos a year where somebody tears down their house and starts new.
Especially at the lake.
We know that well, don't we?
So that doesn't necessarily mean you have 20 to 30 new properties being developed. or 20 new 30 families coming in.
Although,
Homes.
for some, don't mean to point, sorry. With some of those new builds that are on the lake, they're moving into town from other places. We know that because of zoning, they're coming in from Massachusetts, some of them, one came in from New York, and another one from Dover the other day, so they're moving into those, rebuilding them because they don't meet their year-round, living desires.
Still get fire service still.
And police, all the time. Yeah,
And dump,
yeah,
excuse me, recycling center.
yeah. So, yes, even though they are rebuilding, but some of them are being rebuilt because they're gonna be year-round and not seasonal.
I think another thing you have to realize is that with the growth in Nottingham, that's one of the things that keeps our taxes down is the continued added valuation. Every year we end up picking up and, you know, if that stops, you're gonna see your taxes skyrocket.
Well, we're not looking to stop, it's
No, I'm
to-
just saying
it's
that
to
that's-
slow it for a little bit so the town has a chance to catch up. And to be honest, I haven't noticed all that much of a decrease at all in taxes, no matter how much money gets returned or
Maybe it's
given
just
to us
where
from the
Risen
government.
slower than it could have.
It's
I
slow,
s-
it-
Taxes never go down, as long as we keep it trying to go at a
Yeah.
level that's not spiking, that's kind of the, because nothing's getting cheaper in everything.
No, that's
Nothing-
right.
Nothing's gone down.
No, that's right.
So we're just trying to keep it so the elevation is not spiking
Take
on
off.
people, you know, but you have to expect a little every year.
Is your thought that the idea is to slow it, but with the hope that, with that, you would be laying out, or the town would be laying out, well, in what ways we're gonna try and handle the growth? Cause it's, the moratorium, it's very specific about, in the RSA, right, 674, about like what, you pretty much have to publish, well, what are the steps that are gonna be taken, so.
Correct.
I actually pulled up, because I remember actually reading about it before, is like the town of Brookline back in 2021 was proposing one because they saw an increase of like 60 kids to the elementary school in 18 months. And the SAU was like, we actually can't support these, like, if anything above this, and we can't support it. So they did a moratorium, and they're like, all right, the school's creating a facilities committee and all that. So basically gave the school more time, and then basically the town's like, all right, we just won't approve any new ones. Well, I mean, yeah, it certainly, yeah, and like, it would definitely create more work, right? Cause we're gonna have to, probably something to do in conjunction with the departments affected as well, to come up with. Essentially,
Right.
it's CUP, it's
Right.
master plan, it's all that stuff to,
And I
and it
did-
doesn't talk about this, but there definitely is a way to not fully just do a moratorium, there's ways to limit the number of building permits. I think it's under different RSA.
There is.
7423.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
Limitations on building
cause that's the option too, is like, alright, we don't wanna stop it, cause then, or you have to put a bunch of, with the moratorium, you can also put exclusions, like, a lot of times they'll exclude ADUs, or sometimes you can say exclude it from a established record lot. The goal is to try and limit new subdivisions or something like that.
But wouldn't this have to be a warrant article that goes in front of the town? It's not something we
It's
can
laid out with a bunch of pieces, it's not like you just say, you're done, you know, and yay, and, you know, and it goes through, it's, you have to have a lot of pieces that go with it. You know, the strength of the argument of it, if these were to ever be enacted, you know, is gonna be important, because, you know, I could see the town getting dragged into getting, I don't even know what the ramifications are, how these get challenged, if it goes to court or goes to lawsuit, you know.
Usually the town attorney will review it to determine that your reasoning for it is justified.
Yeah.
The town of Conway just did it for commercial buildings in excess of 50,000 square feet, and specifically no hotels, because they're just seeing too many hotels. And the idea is, they specifically needed that extra year to better define their commercial restrictions. And so it's all these are, whether it's commercial or residential, is 1 year, and I believe you can extend up to 5 years with the same justification, so you have to vote on it every year. Like, the voters had to approve that in Conway. So
Right.
every moratorium, we would have, the residents would have to.
Have you been involved in any towns, Dale, that have done that when you've been a building inspector?
No, I've heard of it, and it's very convoluted. it's not gonna be an easy thing. This is going to be, and there is justification for it in certain areas, but this is not just gonna be something that you have a vote and it happens. I think you're gonna have a lot of legal things on your hands to make this go through. That doesn't mean it's not warranted. I don't have an opinion either way. I personally have not been involved, but I've heard of it being a very lengthy process.
Took Conway a year to formulate the moratorium language. Yeah.
Well, and I've heard of other towns doing like a lottery type thing for building permits and having so many per month or something like that as well, and that may be something we look at for slowing down, like 3 in a month or something. But I got really concerned when I saw how much was coming through this year on the planning board side. And in part, I guess that's because I'm back on the board and where I've been away for a little bit, but it's just seeing the growth versus what we have for a sagging
think-
infrastructure bothers me.
If I may, and I'm speaking very abstract, I think one of the arguments that you would have though, in arguing for this, and I've listened to everything that you guys have been saying tonight, and I agree with the majority of it, but we have been returning impact fees on a tremendous rate because the projects are not being done. We are giving back, there was a case where somebody just bought a house recently in this town, and 2 months later, we sent them a check for $5,000. And they came in and said, you made a mistake, you gave us $5,000. We're like, nope, welcome to town, here you go. And they love us. It's gonna be tough to justify
So,
all the things that you're saying when we don't actually spend the money on the things that we say we're going to.
let's
But did you-
clarify this, one of the reasons why this is happening is because of the school and the amount of
Correct.
money that's going in there. There
Correct.
is no new construction, there is no new building.
Correct.
And the impact fees after 5 or 7 years have to go back.
Correct, and the other
Exactly.
part is that the fire department's bond is paid off. Did you tell people that? That's why they were getting
It's
their
not my
money
area,
back?
I don't
Okay,
have
but-
any involvement at all with this. I'm just saying, potential counter arguments to what we're saying is that you want to increase stuff, but we're not actually spending the money that we have.
Well,
And that
we
goes back to the
can't.
voters, you know, if the voters don't vote for the school, as you said, or the construction,
Again, against it, we give the money to the rec department, but we specifically said that it was only good for Marston.
right,
Well, we're getting a whole new jungle gym out here, which the kids use and they need out here because the other one's broken, but we can't use impact fees on it. It's a $15,000 gym, which would be nice to be able to use impact fees because it benefits the town. The town's growing, we need more stuff for the kids to do, but we can't spend it because we said that fee only goes to Marston.
That
A
goes to.
wrong way to do it.
That goes to Ed's point of reviewing the impact fees, you can alter the way that the existing one is worded based on that.
Absolutely.
Or as long as it's still within the provisions of what you can.
We haven't
alter
had,
in
we
that.
were, I mean, this is just a side conversation tonight, but we've already sat here and discussed of all the problems we're having with the impact fees and the money not being going where they're going and where it should be going. I mean, this discussion probably should be prioritized because of the amount of money that's coming in. And as we just talked about, if there's 40-something new things at $5,000 a piece, it's 200 grand. Hey,
Really, the CUP.
let's say where are we spending that money?
Is
If
it-
we're not, why have it?
Is it possible to do an impact fee for a project that has like sort of an ongoing component to it? So one of the things that we keep talking about is doing it for a building or a singular project, right? What about like improving or expanding a roadway system or something like that? So that's like every time you take in 2 impact fees, you can
no,
put
an
$10,000.
an impact fee by law has to go to a specific project and has to be identified when you do it.
There's offsite exactions that are separate that you can utilize if a large project comes in and we think it's gonna, you know, even though it's this over here, there's an intersection down here that really needs improvement and having 100 extra trips a day going through that intersection, but it's proportionate share again, and that still, even if we apply $100,000 to the developer for that exaction, and then the town doesn't do it or doesn't, then we can't use their money, so.
Hey, and this might be another vague example, which might correct me on this one before I say it, but I'm gonna say it anyways. You build a building and you don't put AC in it, 5 years later you wanna put AC in the building. You could probably use that impact fee to put it. You can't replace an old AC system with it.
Correct.
But since you're adding a new, because there never was one there.
Right.
Then the fee can be probably applied.
Yeah.
Yeah, you use.
It has to be new.
Plans and
Yeah.
things, I think that was, the school used some of it before,
The school wanted to use it for the roof, but they couldn't use it for the
No,
roof,
they used
they
it
wanted
for
to use it for this, they
design.
couldn't do the windows. They
design
can't-
of, future plan.
Renovate or create?
So again, with the planning, I mean, the planning board, we're limited by the language of the RSA,
Basis for
and
repairs.
then ultimately by,
Repairs don't count.
by the voters. So, and, you know, we go by the CIP, you have to go through the process of creating, an impact fee, which has to have a study based on criteria. And then ultimately, you know, it goes back to the town as
They can
to
use-
things get developed or they don't get
that.
developed, and you can't
They
spend
could
something
use
on
it
something that's
for-
never built.
The new science room, the new room.
Well,
So
and,
they're only a piece of a solution.
and don't forget how many times we, back when I was on the board before, met with the school even saying, you gotta come up with something to be using these impact fees for, and it just
Didn't happen.
didn't happen. Which is why they went back. So I think impact fees are good, but they don't solve all the problems, number one. And number two, I don't see how having all of these extra homes coming in and adding to the burden is going to help any if we don't do something about it. And I think we need to do something about it soon. Because as people have to sell off their land, be able to pay taxes or do whatever, we're gonna see more of these
Oh, I don't agree
developments
with that
coming in.
statement, Teresa. People that are selling off their land, just selling it to developers to make a big chunk of money, or they already have it in current use, so they're not paying any money on it anyways.
But-
Every development that we're seeing out there has been enough lands where those people have all had it in current use, and they're gonna pay the current use tax, which goes to the conservation, which is good for the town, but there's nobody that's, I mean,
But what is it,
selling an acre of land to make money, because you can't do that, because you can't make a buildable lot out of it anyways.
disagree, but that's okay.
So,
Under, it's under the growth management, so the two RSAs specifically that we're speaking about for anybody that's following, 674/2022, 674:22, growth management, timing of development. So there's a process involved in there, and it outlines it. And then there's also an option under RSA 675-4 there to have this be done by a petition of voters. The second piece is, when that's 675:4, which is a general warrant article petition. The other piece of it that we're talking about, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive or mutually, they're not necessarily one, you need both, it could be one or the other, or both, is 674:23, temporary moratorium limitations on building permits and the approval of subdivision and site plan. So there's a whole list of criteria that, so this is nothing I don't think we would ever complete this year if this is something the town's looking to do, or there's enough interest, and it would be a process that we'd have to start kicking off, to start getting the pieces in place.
To that point, I think
My understanding.
the CUP has to kind of develop this fall to then justify,
CIP,
to create the justifications for it.
So I think this could be a topic, I think this should be a topic probably for the CIP, when the CIP is created, to make sure it's discussed, with that group as well, to see if, based on what is coming before them from all the town departments.
And Ed, you mentioned 675-4, the enactment, okay, it's right here. That's a 25 or more voters may petition for an amendment to the zoning, which would then have to go to vote, which may be actually a quick and easy way of having it done.
That could be a much different way, yep. Yep. I don't see that listed under 20:23, so I don't know if that piece can go through. Yeah, so I don't know if that piece can also go through petition. That would be a question that if it came in, legal would chime in on. But 674:22 specifically does give that option.
Right.
All right.
Housing shortage.
What's that?
We're up to housing shortage, which John briefly mentioned.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I looked at a different list. Housing shortage in New Hampshire, how does this relate to our zoning ordinances? what can boards do to alleviate the problem, and does our current ordinance contribute to the problem? I didn't put these in order, and I don't mean to laugh, there's nothing funny about that, it's just, you know, that's where I think as land use boards, we always try to strike that balance, and that goes back to our master plan, our zoning, and everything else. The balance between our current community, everybody that's invested in it here, in the past and the current, and then, you know, anybody that might wanna move here, trying to balance, you know, landowner rights, with community rights. So where, you know, there's a balance on the restrictions, and where do you find that balance? And we try to navigate that pretty, you know, pretty well. And then you have the state chime in as well as to, you know, they've got housing boards now, and, you know, it seems like the state's really trying to push for additional housing.
Affordable housing though,
Affordable housing, right?
not the $600,000 homes that are going up in the developments.
Nottingham isn't gonna ever have affordable housing.
It's
We
unlikely.
don't have the infrastructure in town for sewer, septic wells, or any of that to make affordable housings. Our zoning ordinances aren't written to have anything for affordable housing. I mean, open space development is the only thing that we actually have to actually reduce the size of land to put a smaller house on. And we don't, I mean, we know that's a pain to go through. I mean, it's,
But
I don't
apartments
see-
would be more of affordable housing.
right,
or
but you need X amount of land to put in an apartment for this, to read our zoning ordinances for the fact that
Yeah, I agree, ADUs.
ADUs do help, but again, the certain size of the ADU, whether you're adding on to the 700 square feet, it's real minimum for, I mean,
And they
you
make
and
it
your
so you-
husband living in an ADU for 720 square feet is,
Yeah, we have, I think the least restrictive.
Hassle for me,
The least,
coming out of the city.
Or like, sign me up.
I'd be more than happy to take your ADU if you got one off.
so a couple of the regional, meetings I've attended in the past, in the last year or so, or two, mayors blend together. You know, there is an understanding that cities will be the ones that absorb quite a bit of the initial housing piece of, you know, so apartments and things like that. Because they've got the infrastructure for it, they've got water, town sewer, fire apparatus, they can build higher, and things of that nature. And generally, when they see desirability, a lot of it, there's more desirability, people wanna live in cities and things like that, or at least that's what some of the data is showing.
Plus is public transportation.
Public transportation, all those pieces. So rural communities such as ours, you know, even though sometimes it feels like we're not as rural as we once were, you know, we still don't have, there's no plan at all that I've ever heard for town water, town sewer. Yes, we have an aquifer protection district to
we don't have a
protect wellhead
stoplight.
areas. We don't have a stoplight, correct?
Right.
We don't have, we're not near hospitals, so that's prevented some types of housing from looking at the town. Like 55 plus communities, we're too far from resources. So is there things we can do? You know, I think our probably least restrictive thing right now in our zoning, when you talk about multifamily, are multifamily conversions, that it probably is a loophole that can get abused, because it's not very clear as to what constitutes a conversion.
Conversion from what?
So my understanding of it, the goal of that was to retain some of our old like farmhouses or large colonial houses, things of that nature, by allowing them to be converted to multifamily units. So instead of having them be torn down. But, you know, what constitutes a conversion? Because we've had one I can think of in town where it ended up being a complete tear down and it was rebuilt on the same footprint with 5 units, so, on a lot that if you went to put in a 5-family home, you would not have been able to, you wouldn't have been able to put a duplex on it.
And you gotta think of this, I mean, close to wetlands, close to whatever it is for the septic systems that's going in.
So our multifamily stuff,
We don't have
we usually basically double all the requirements for every family unit that's going in. So if it's a 2-family, it's 4 acres and 60,000 square feet of buildable area. If it's a 4-family, it's 820, so
So you might as well split them off into lots, 2 lots and sell them for 600 grand.
So part of this too is I've actually encountered this on a project I worked on in Brentwood, and Brentwood is considering rewriting some of their multifamily because Brentwood's even has worse housing prices. And they actually have similar where we require 2 acres per dwelling unit. And then, you know, some of those like 30,000 square feet of contiguous, but the big one there is basically your maximum density is 1 per 2 acres. So, and a lot, so essentially if you want 10 units, which you could develop a 10 unit, you know, either where it's 2 buildings, 2 5-unit buildings, is specific to what I've actually done. The issue is you can do that within 2 acres of land. But, and then you have 20 acres of land, so it actually leaves a lot of unusable, or a lot of upland land that's reserved. But then if you compare that 1 per 2 acre requirement to say what you would do for your state septic approval, which is usually lot loading is what you would go to, it could yield based on soils to say 50 units. I mean, that's, you don't want 50 units, but the 1 per 2 acre is often seen when comparing, because it actually makes reference to, you know, must meet all the state of New Hampshire water supply and pollution control. Well, I think the town requirement governs, right? You gotta go with most restrictive. With the state, there's really not many cases where the state's gonna allow you to get more because of the soil limitations, unless you have really bad soils. We've run into this a number of times where it might yield out to 50 units per the state lot loading, based on soil type, and then 1 per 2 acres though is, they're kinda capped at that, so. Sometimes it's not a matter of, you don't wanna have 50, but maybe you want a little more than 10, is they'll sometimes take, and you basically get, if you're doing multifamily, you can do certain, I guess, bonuses, workforce, right? A lot of workforce places will do a bonus to get you, to encourage, cause usually the workforces, you have to be able to, cost the same to build, but you're restricted on what you can rent it to, so they give you a little bonus.
I think we do that in our open space for workforce housing. We offer a density bonus. That's the only way we offer a density bonus.
Yeah, it's only, the only place we do offer it there, but.
Do we have any workforce housing in this town? No, because if it's financially a failure, you can't do it and charge the rent and make any money. Right? So nobody's gonna do it.
Especially for single family, because you still have to build the infrastructure of a roadway and lay all the utilities. At least with a multifamily building, you only have to get a driveway onto the site, and then you can do a single structure, or maybe a cluster of, you know.
I think it's kind of silly to, given the housing shortage, to require 2 acres per unit. If there are 4 units in a building, that's 8 acres. It's a lot of land that's not used very well. Probably the septic system is 1 for the whole place. In other words, they don't need that much land. And land is, as you may know, pretty darn expensive right now. It's outrageously expensive. I remember buying my first piece of land in Barrington. It was 11 acres. Paid $1,500 for it. Paid cash too. And now that piece of land is worth probably $300,000 because land is scarce.
You know, in perusing a lot of different zoning ordinances throughout the area, I mean, to not begin to reduce the frontage and area requirements as you go up for multifamily is rare, right? So you were saying every unit is a double. So if it's four units, you need 8 acres.
I believe so, from memory, but yeah.
It is, for, in your zoning. That, it is rare, so that might be a first place to start, just to consider.
You're talking to relax our ordinances?
Yes.
Okay, so again, then we go against the, again, I'm being impartial here, but by relaxing the ordinance is promoting more building, more development.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
More students, more fire, more density. So you
Well,
might not build 40 houses, but what's the difference between 40 houses and 40 condos?
Well, it's a lot, I mean,
Well, I'm just
you're
saying.
not gonna get as many kids in the condos.
You sure?
Usually the
Yes.
numbers show it's like it's pretty low ratio. But also, in most cases, while the only apartment building I'm really aware of built last how many years is the one on 152. Usually, if you do remove multifamily,
there.
you've got,
There's two on 152.
One next to Demons.
There's the one next to
that's right,
Demons
yeah.
and the one by the
is
power
now,
lines.
usually with the multifamily, is you're trying to consolidate your development, and it's usually not, it's instead of a 30 lot open space subdivision, where the town, in theory, probably may absorb that road in the future. With multifamily, the town's never absorbing
The driveway.
to that, so there is usually less absorbable infrastructure to the town
On that respect, yeah.
with that. So it's like, yes, you're still potentially having to pull the same number of permits or number of units in town, but there is probably less long-term impact to some aspects of the infrastructure.
There's also a balance to design it well, so that, obviously, we've had our ordinance the way it is, we've had large lots for quite a while. How do you balance existing neighborhoods in housing, you know, with, if, with the potential for, you know, say, larger apartment buildings and things of that nature, so, you know, maybe you do reduce the lot size, you know, so it's not doubling every time, but you increase the setback or vegetative buffers and things of that nature to try to provide that harmony with, you know, it's not my backyard situation, but it's try to provide the harmony of like, okay, you know, yes, it's making it less restrictive, it's kind of what the state is looking for, it's kind of, you know, some in our community are probably looking for that, so they can stay within the community, but that you're not negatively impacting those that are, you know, already here and have already invested in the community and in their homes. So I think, to me, I think this is a good point for something that would be a takeaway for, not that I wanna punt it down the road, but when we do a master plan update, the housing chapter, and looking at that, and that would be a big piece of that, I think, especially if we were able to get a grant for it, was to have takeaways and then actionable items for us.
To that point too, I think Blair, you mentioned there is a part of that investment nature, it was either like 10, 12, or 20 million was, part of it was specifically for, there was a certain number of millions that was specifically for municipalities to get those grants.
Yeah,
So I
Yeah, a
think
vast
it-
majority
I think I recall, it's actually, they made it fairly easy to figure out what that process is. I
Yep.
don't know if it's all been eaten up at this point, but.
you know, we have a housing navigator in our office that's paid for through that program, so I can reach out to her and find out what's available. But, I have gone over it with her, like she kind of explained it to some of us, and that's what I was talking about with that public outreach component. But yeah, in terms of like getting some money towards your master plan, yeah. Or, it's not even just that, master plan, or if you wanna do zoning, regulatory changes, right? So if you want assistance for regulatory, you know, you've got a master plan, you kinda know the direction you wanna go, but now you just need some help to work through the finer points of your zoning ordinance amendments or subdivision regulation amendments. That, those funds can go towards that as well. It's not just to do your master plan.
Well, it teases us right into the ADUs. So I don't know, well, before we get to ADUs, Alon, did we get anything else from, like, say, the police department, fire, road agent, highway, recycling, town administrator, anybody else? Okay, good. Not good, but I'm sure we didn't miss it.
So
Yeah, so we'll go,
why don't we just, if there's something in these ordinance that you see in them from our conversation tonight, in my thought or process, why don't we limit, why don't we make it easier for people to get ADUs, since the septic's already in there, the well's already in there, the house is already there, the lot's developed already in there. A lot of these ADUs are going to be, is it the nuclear family, or how do you say, when the grandparents and the parents live together, or the kids? You know, I mean, it's beneficial for, there's more benefits I find in people having ADUs than building new houses. So as we put the regulations, because I remember when the regulations was it 500 square feet before it went to 700? I mean, when we sat on the board 10 years ago, it was, people come in here and they're like, I can't build anything for 480 square feet, because it was basically, I mean, a studio apartment was bigger than that. You know, but make the regulations or make the process of people getting ADUs a lot more easy, let's improve that if we want to help with housing in town for people to get there, for people's kids to stay there longer, having an ADU built in. And then people can also have an ADU down the road, they can use it as a rental. You know, or, I mean,
That
again,
helps
we're not,
with the rental market.
but then that helps with the market too. So ADUs probably have probably one of the biggest benefits from what we talked about right here.
And the law allows them to be detached.
And
The
again,
town doesn't allow them, but the
I
law.
was just gonna ask about that, cause like we require
The law allows you to.
attached, right? Yeah.
So yeah, I was gonna say, so right now, I don't think the permitting process is hard to do an attached ADU as written. It's,
Detached.
and that's what's been coming up as a question is,
well, you have a barn with
going
it.
through a detached
You can't
ADU.
propose a new ADU on a detached structure from the main home. That's the way it's written, yeah.
But we should change that.
There you go, that's a perfect example.
And that's a big part of it too, is a lot of times, maybe the lot configuration is such that it should be detached. Or
Or
if you
there
wanna
are-
encourage rentals,
or there are
people don't always wanna
existing
be in
buildings
something
that you
attached to
I
it.
think that's a huge point, because thinking about this from your family, the nuclear family, yes, that's what it's gonna start out as, but long-term, it's not gonna be that. So.
Of course not.
Yeah, so having it detached encourages people to utilize it. Some people might just end up leaving it vacant if they come, you know, if they move in and it's right on top of them, they might not like that, but,
Well, the person who buys the whole property is gonna be of what happens of what's there. It's still to their right. Whether
yeah, exactly,
they
sure,
keep
sure.
it for this or not. Some people might buy the whole property and say, you know what? That's gonna be for when my grandkids come over, or when my kids come from California to stay over, and that's gonna be their place to come for 2 weeks, and I ain't renting it just because my guests, you know, I mean,
Yep.
it's up to their priority of what they want, but if they wanna rent it for income, it's available. You know, because we're gonna tax them on it,
Yeah.
so they're, you know, it's up to them on how they wanna spend it.
But you're right, I mean, you know, as planners, what we always talk about, what we call infill development, which is exactly what an ADU is. I mean, you're already working with the existing infrastructure that you have, the roadway, the driveway, everything is already there. It is the best way to bring in new units without as much impact as a new development might do. So, it is one of the easiest ways, it's one of the most appealing ways to people that live in the community.
And you could make it too in the ADUs, that the ADU can only have one bathroom, you know, one shower, so that you're not having it, hey, I'm building an ADU, but it's, I'm offering 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and, you know,
It's only 750 square feet.
Well, again, we could change that to make it
You can have
900
all
square
bathrooms.
feet.
Yeah, there's a reason,
Make it,
the reason that the square footage, I wanna acknowledge Dale for, in a minute. In the past, so the state increased the minimum square footage. In the past, it was smaller. And the thought process of why a lot of towns keep it small was to try to keep it within, and I'm gonna speak about code, which I do not understand. I don't know if it's even true anymore. Try to keep it 1 bedroom, so that you do not get rental units with 2 bedrooms, which then you could potentially be families, and then add to the burden of school.
Which is now against the RSA.
Limiting the number of bedrooms,
It says a municipality may not limit an ADU to only 1 bedroom.
but can the square footage, so I'm sorry, Dale, you had your hand up, but can square footage limit occupancy size?
Real quick, let me just address the ADU issue before I,
Perfect, thank you.
so the state actually has requirements, and we're just following along them. The maximum is 750, you can't control the bedrooms, you have to have an interior door between the two, otherwise it becomes multifamily. You can't control how many bedrooms they have, those are the basic requirements right there. The reason that they say it has to have an interior door is because it has to be attached, because then we're getting into multifamily and all the other things that we just discussed.
The multifamily loophole.
But you
Right.
can have a detached.
And that's how people are getting around it, is they're just building 2 primary residents on 1 lot and saying it's an ADU, and then one of the other requirements is the homeowner has to live on one of the units. There's no way of following up with that, and what are we gonna do if they move out, how, you know, that's a really almost unenforceable one.
Dover, I think, has had a permit for that every year they have to renew their
Yeah.
ADU permit.
But, so there is requirements on the state side to talk about that. But I kinda see this as a bigger issue, if I may. And this is the main reason what I was hoping to talk about tonight. I'm the one who brought up this ADU issue and asked it to come here. And I have no opinion on what the rules are. I don't care what you guys come up with, it's my job to enforce them. I'm not supposed to have an opinion, I'm neutral. My job is to, one, protect the town, protect the existing residents, but also help the applicants get through the process as easy as possible. You know, we're not supposed to be mean to them and things like that. What I'm seeing, and the ADU is one that kept coming up, and I'm kinda seeing this a lot. If we keep sending people to the ZBA, and the same things are getting overturned each time, and the ADUs is the example I brought up, because that's kind of the bigger one, it's one of two things. Either our rules are too strict, or we're not, the ZBA has a different philosophy than the planning board. Doesn't make a difference what the rules are. We shouldn't be overturning the same thing again and again and again. If we're doing that, then the rule is wrong, and the planning board should change the rule. If we're not, then the zoning board should look at it. It doesn't make a difference, neither side is right or wrong. But almost every case that I send to the ZBA gets overturned.
What's the
That's fine.
what's the primary reason they're going to the ZBA for? Well, obviously I know that, but
Setbacks is a big one. Setbacks is the main one.
There's a reason to, you're getting it.
I was gonna say, you're not talking ADUs as much as you are setback.
I'm talking everything. I'm just
Okay.
I used ADU as an example because that was the most blatantly, you know, there are reasons where you have setbacks. Somebody wants to build a house or they wanna build something and they're 19 feet away, I mean, they're only 1 foot over. There's reasons to overturn and have, and the 5 questions. There really
Say
are.
overturn, you mean approve the request for
To
variance.
approve a variance. There are reasons to, and I don't have that luxury. For me, it's black and white. The ZBA has the luxury to add an element of common sense and see if it works for the town, if it's in the best interest of everything. But if we're overturning everyone, and this is not a shot at the ZBA or the planning board, but if we're overturning every single time the same thing over and over again, we either need to change our rules, or the ZBA and the planning board get on the same page. And again, I'm not insulting anybody, but how many denials do we actually, how many times does the ZBA actually ever say
We-
no? I mean, it's
Right, we don't get that many ADU detached. We
not
probably had-
ADUs, just in general, I'm
right, but
talking
we probably
anything.
had 6, right?
Pretty much the most that we have is a lot of continuances, and the ZBA is doing their due diligence, and they say, come back with this, or come back with that, and look at this. But eventually, everybody's getting it. And that's not a shot at the ZBA, because the ZBA may say this makes sense. What I would like to see, and what I was kinda hoping, is more of a philosophical of the ZBA and the planning board, and even the Board of Selectmen, kinda getting on the same page. We should not be overturning the same rule again and again and again. If that's the case, then the rule is wrong. Whether it's ADUs, setbacks, building height, whatever it is, everybody can't just come in, go to the ZBA, pay a fee, and get what they want. That's not fair to the existing taxpayers. It's not fair to any of us, the planning board, you know.
And again, I agree, because I went to the past 2 meetings, and again, I trust me, I sat on the zoning board for 6 years, I know what you guys have been through. I was on it for USA Spring, so it was just, it was terrible back then, but, you know, when somebody comes in, which I don't think it's fair for you guys, when somebody comes in and they're asking for 3 variances, for setbacks on their property, you know, I mean, you're asking for a variance for 19 feet when you need 20? Yeah, you should grant that guy every single day. I mean, it's a foot, right? The 20's the rule. But when people are coming in and they start asking all these things where he's sending them there because there's 4 things on our thing that they're not even close to being. You know,
There's a certain area
or
of
3.
town that tends to have those
Of course
needs,
it is,
but,
but-
it also goes towards, it actually is hard for the zoning board, because the zoning board is governed by very clear criteria that you have to meet.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. The
And
hardships
God,
and-
hey,
And this is not a shot at the zoning board
No,
in
it's-
any way.
No, I see what you're
But
saying.
if they are looking at those criteria, and those criteria every time says they're meeting it, then maybe we as a town need to say,
Yeah.
this rule is not appropriate.
I think the hard part is the, pardon?
The criteria?
Zoning board's governed by
The
5
5.
5 questions.
The hardest part is, and that I think we put the most weight onto, is the hardship. And
Hardest one
everyone,
to prove.
But it's also, when you look at some of these lots, where the size of them and the shape of them make it very difficult for them to put an average size and sometimes oversized homes on them. And that is, I think, more often why we end up leaning towards, yeah, you've got a hardship, your lot stinks, and my opinion is you knew what you bought when you bought it. However, if it's passed down from generation to generation, they've inherited this problem too, so, you know, we look at it and go, and the neighbors are all like, I don't care what they do, most of the time, not always.
What neighbors are you talking about?
The ones that show up here, you come to to our meetings.
So I guess I would say, and again, I really don't have an opinion, and I kind of under the belief it's your property, you should be allowed within reason to do things. But if we are gonna put all of our emphasis on hardship,
I didn't say all.
not, if we're gonna put a main emphasis, and I'm not countering what you're saying, then change the rules. If that's what it's gonna be. We should not be sending everybody to the ZBA and getting everything granted. And I'm not saying that you should automatically, it's not like a quota thing or anything like that. It's either, both boards, all of you are in a very tough spot.
No, I agree, you bring up a good point.
We're just, there is no denials coming back to me that says, no, this is denied.
Yeah, we did that a number of years ago. There was something else there was two things that kept always going to the ZBA. One was no frontage on a class 5 road. That was determined, well, too bad, the process does have to go to ZBA. And we couldn't give relief from here. But there was another item, and I can't remember what it was, but it was looked at, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes no sense, and we put a warrant article through, change it.
A
and that-
septic system with 50
Yeah,
feet or
I think
something.
it was something like that.
Yeah.
So this, you know, the lake
We got that moved
area-
down to 20 feet, when the state even that,
Yeah.
it was at 50, I asked it to come down to 20. I should have asked for 10, because that's what the state is.
Because the state uses
So we're
10.
still telling people, well, the state will approve it at 10, but we're saying no. I mean, we should really be dropping that down to 10 feet. I wanted to kind of compromise and, because I didn't think that it would go through, but that's a perfect example. Why are we exceeding what the state says?
Well, it's a good point too, especially with septics, because the state, right, they'll just give you a permit for 10 feet, and it's up on, it's to you, the landowner, to then try and get the town to allow it. And
They
like,
will
whenever you
only-
can align with, you know, I always think of.
We're a
higher-
pre-approval town, so
Right.
for new construction, they can't give a permit until we do, but for replacement, they can ignore us completely and do what they want.
Gotcha. And that's where I think certain things like technical requirements, like wastewater bureau or something like that, makes a lot of sense to align with the state regulations. Cause then also the town's not always having to, like, every 2 years, because the state changes their regulations, like, oh, should we change ours? If you can, you'd still have to publish it, but if you can say we align with the state,
I just wondered about that.
yeah,
wording.
you
That-
can reference,
That sounds like a
yeah,
good,
not
smart
that they
thing.
changed drastically over the years, but, I mean, AOT is the only one that's really been changing a lot lately, but that usually doesn't.
That's what we do on building codes, is whatever the state adopts, we adopt.
Right, whatever the IBC is or something like that, yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, specifically the ADUs, I mean, that's one that I had really put a ton of effort into, but I certainly do agree. I mean, you got great points of the detached, just removing that, because there is the RSA that Teresa had, is it does allow for detached, it allows the municipality to allow it. That seems to not conflict with any multifamily limits, but the detached. gives
I haven't
you-
seen, and I'm not questioning you, I just haven't seen that. I thought the
Yeah,
state
six,
requires,
674 something, right?
the state requires that you have an interior door.
It does.
They allow they allow towns to require.
To override
It used
that.
to be, so the ADUs,
Right,
that
it used
RSA got changed a bunch of times, like every year it had a change. So it went from 350 square feet to whatever. It still allows the towns to have that requirement, an interior common door.
But now if we get into it now,
You
going
can
back
still
to the
require
ADU
one on
specifically,
occupied.
just by saying you can have it detached, going back to what you said before, as far as multifamily, do we require the acreage now, or do we just ignore that rule?
It
talks
it
about
talks
that.
about that in here, so if, when you get a chance to pick up the book, it's 674:71 through 674:73.
Yep, but I still have to follow what the town ordinance is,
Right.
not that.
I know, but I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just because I think we should align with this, number one.
Well, our regs say that it does not, you do not need to meet minimum lot area for an ADU. So like, it doesn't, it's
Doesn't
not,
impact the lot area size.
yeah,
The RSA, specifically the detached, when they added the one regarding detached, it says that the municipality may require, like in the sense of a detached, they may require, if they choose, if we choose, you may require additional.
oh, cause that's the state versus the
Correct.
town. The
Yeah.
town's currently says it doesn't count.
It's a pretty short paragraph, they basically just say, state law is not gonna prohibit it, but the municipality needs to permit it, and they may put additional restrictions if you want detached versus attached.
Going back to the bigger picture, if I may, and this is only a suggestion, perhaps if we're gonna actually do a review, Mr. Chairman, let's look at all the denials for the last year or two, do a summary of what they are and see how many have been overturned, and that might tell you what rules may or may not
Yeah,
be.
or conversely, I'd like to see if it's the same thing that's going, the same consistent request going to the ZBA. I think this is what we did in the past, was, okay, what's being requested? Is it always relief from a setback?
Yes, 90%.
And are 90% of those coming from the same area? So I, you
Yes.
know, I at one point envisioned, do we create another district, call it like the Lakes District or something? Knowing that those are pre-existing lots, they're all, in general, not always, pre-existing non-conforming lots of
I'm
record.
personally not a big fan of that, I think you have to treat everybody the same.
I would say
But-
75% of our cases come out of the lake. Yeah.
But if those are, we know those are already there, and we're seeing, you know, consistently variances for the 20-foot setback, and they're reducing to 10, I'm just throwing numbers out there. Do
You
we
wanna be
change
able
the
to
setbacks
say,
to 10
yeah,
for a certain area?
in that district.
And again,
But if we're looking at philosophy too,
But for only pre-existing non-conforming lots of record.
you know, I'm sitting here just listening, and we spent a considerable amount of time about saying that we shouldn't be allowing more building, and then we spent a considerable amount of time that says just the opposite, that we should be allowing affordable houses and things like that. So if we do change all these rules and lower the rules, understand, there's gonna be a lot more building permits. I don't care either way, whatever you guys decide, whether we say we're going to lower our standards on certain things, or, on the other hand, we're gonna ask that you try to follow them unless you know, really have a hardship or really have something that says a reason why. They shouldn't be separate, they should be kind of merged together, is my only point.
And that's the battle too, is everybody has differing opinions on levels of growth, where it should be.
Yep.
And like my personal opinion is, to be honest, where we're situated, we are sandwiched by development expanding from multiple cities. Is that then it's a matter of how you manage the growth, and that's where it's, your easiest ways to manage growth while still accommodating, you know, say the need to try and keep taxes or the rate lower by having more people paying in, is you've got your multifamily, which is condensing your development, which again, as I said, maybe limit your town infrastructure and ADUs, because you're not adding new roads, it's already in place, it's already accessible, so. Those are kind of, and that's all saying, that's very different than building a new 2,000-foot long road, which in 5 years the town now takes on. It's well known that if you build a new road, the people that front on that road, oftentimes their taxes and what actually gets devoted to, say, DPW, generally doesn't cover what their road costs to maintain. in the
That's
long
right.
run.
But
That's just always the way it's been,
yeah, the ADU, I mean, they're plowing their own driveway.
Yeah, there's additional tax revenue, like to the, I think what you said, Ed, is statistically, you're not gonna see a school impact because it's a one-bedroom unit that you're not gonna see it.
I think with the elderly population in New Hampshire, you're gonna have some way of
Or you see
being
Durham, I
able to
mean,
keep them and take care
Durham
of
is
them.
ADUs for students, I mean, that's where a lot of people make.
As somebody who is extremely neutral, and I have no dog in this fight, I don't pay taxes in this town, I don't, you know, I'm just enforcing. I see ourselves in a lot of conflict with ourselves though. And basically what we're telling the applicant is, you go spend this money and you're gonna get what you want. That's not how it should be. That's all I have to say.
Well, if it becomes unnecessary, we're not here to.
That sounded like
create
Forrest
unnecess-
Gump, I'm sorry.
No,
That's all I
and
have
get what
to
you're
say
saying.
about
We're
that.
not here to create unnecessary additional, not, you know, just burdens from both town staff time, applicant time, board time, you know, we all have things to do,
Killing
so,
trees for paper.
you know, so if we can find a way to tweak these things, and oftentimes that's where these conversations come, you know, start that process, is to look at that, review it, and see, oh yeah, okay, well, how do we, should we alleviate this, how do we alleviate it, then come up with a warrant article, and then ultimately, the town decides as to, you know, whether they agree with us or they keep it status quo. So, I think that would be a piece for us, is to get a review of current, or say, whatever, variances have been requested for the last year or two, and see if there's a commonality that we can identify to.
We can tell you, it's setbacks. It is, all of our meetings are related to setbacks.
Setbacks
Some
for
of them for.
Pre-existing, non-conforming lots of
yeah,
record.
Correct. Once in a while, you get a request because they need a new septic and it needs to be on an area that's closer to their neighbor. But I'd say out of the setback ones, probably 90% of them at least are related to people wanting to build these bigger homes.
On
They
non-conforming.
used to be camps and now they're not.
Correct. Correct. And it's because they're moving in and it's going to be a permanent home and not just a seasonal home. So I think if, I don't know, it's getting close to 9 o'clock. Do we want to set another date to meet again to discuss these things that we've just kind of breezed through tonight?
Yeah, well, I think,
I'd like to ask one more question relative to ADUs, because I've been reading the law here. It says that the town, municipalities have an obligation to provide workforce housing. Is that just a zoning, thing? Because we don't have any workforce housing subdivisions that I'm aware of. But ADUs can meet the municipality's obligation.
and we do allow ADUs. And we do have that provision for workforce housing, and we allow multifamily, I think, in all zones except for the commercial industrial, I believe.
So if we've met our obligation.
From my memory,
That was put in because a lot of towns had essentially extremely prohibitive laws or no workforce overlay. I mean, you can either do it based on just uses within a zone, or you do overlays. And sometimes they do an overlay, but it's still prohibitive because of certain requirements within
you
workforce.
have to allow it in anything, any zone that allows multifamily or something like that, residential, I can't remember the rule, but I believe I do believe we meet that, I know it was looked at at one point. So to Mrs. Bascom's, point, I think the next up on that, you know, the planning board's probably gonna have a work session on warrant articles at some point in the near month or two. And I think that would be something where, you know, I would welcome input from the ZBA again, whether it's a joint meeting or not.
Paul, I think tonight we hit two major points of discussion. You know, I mean, one right there was ADU seems to be a subject that's, you know, pretty endearing to all of us, or, you know, to helping what we're talking about. And then, obviously, you know, finding out why the zoning board, who probably should only be having 12 cases a year, are now having 30, is a direct reflect that maybe our zoning ordinances, which is controlled by the planning board, aren't doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. Now, again, reducing, if it's 90% setbacks, I mean, we can have that discussion as a group and figure what we consider on how to change them. I'm not saying that I think our setbacks right now are pretty adequate to what they should be to give people the elbow room on their lots. But we did have the change for years ago, we had the setbacks when people were trying to put their shed because it was,
Right.
they couldn't do it, so we changed that.
Right.
To say, okay, now you can put your shed, we don't consider that to be part of that. So we have done this before. Is what we did, because you guys are seeing, the zoning board was seeing people
Yeah,
putting their
remember that, the
sheds, you know?
sheds.
Like, I got my shed 50 feet back, and people were like, really? It's a 10 by 10 shed. It didn't make any sense.
And the
So
other-
we
the other-
changed that.
The other part of that, which I wanna reread our ordinance to see if this is actually, should be taken part of these pre-existing non-conforming lots that are building larger structures. You know, it's not just that they're building on the same footprint, my understanding, they're building oftentimes larger.
Bigger.
Decks. you're increasing the impervious surface that's on
Correct.
that site, so are we, now, should they also be seeking relief for, or do we need to calculate how much impervious surface is on that site? And is that a second piece that they're, that-
Well, then you're gonna make, then
Then you're requiring site plan.
and then you'll be seeing twice as many people go.
no, it's just another, variance, it's a second piece of the variance.
Is it an
So-
existing non-conform?
This, looking for
The shed is
maximum
much
lot
different
coverage.
than living space.
You know, but there's also a need that when you see these new houses being built, as I familiar with the lake, and it doesn't matter if it's, I mean, we have two good-sized lakes that are building houses on, which variances come from all of them, because they have small lots and stuff like this, actually three, if you wanna play it that way. You know, the building on your existing structure is good, but there's people that are coming into it and say, well, this is what I want. They're not going to say, well, I'm going to work with the variances or with the zoning ordinance here, and I'm willing to design my house to work with the ordinances in town.
Yep.
They're basically saying, screw you, town, I wanna put this up.
Yeah, we had a case that recently.
So it, you know, there's, you know, it also becomes, you know, it's not the zoning boards is why they're seeing it. It's the people that are coming in that say, guess what? I have $1 million in my pocket and I'm gonna build whatever I want. I'm gonna see Dale 12 times and I'm gonna push whatever I can to see if I can get it done.
But a lot of ours are septics. A lot
Sure.
of our setbacks, and what
But-
they're doing is generally improving what's there.
Sure.
Something near the lake.
Yeah.
You don't put it behind your
But
house or
then,
near.
but there's people too that don't wanna do the good septic, they wanna do the cheap way out on their septic. And those aren't the different, there's different septic systems out there, which we've
Well,
discussed.
the
at one of the
state
meetings.
approves them,
Right.
state oversees. Like septics.
Do you want to send out a date, email, or?
Yeah, I think it'll be a discussion.
Do you wanna first have a meeting with the planning board to go over what we find for what the, these reasons for all the variances are going, not variance, I say it, I keep saying that wrong, I apologize, for why so many people are going in front of the zoning board, so that we as a planning board can discuss it, cause we are the board that is to change or make that recommendation.
Yeah, I'd like to get
Of
that on,
why
for one of our
it's
future
happening.
meetings, you know, sooner than later, you know, as soon as we can kinda get that data compiled, and I'll have to talk to Alana, Blair, or Teresa to see how we can get that compiled easily.
Well, we are supposed to, the zoning board is scheduled to meet on the 12th, correct? But we do not have any cases for that
Did we
night.
continue on?
Yes.
Yeah, we did, except that person brought in a new application, so
Oh,
it is
okay,
now
so
a
they're
new
not-
app.
They're not,
So,
okay.
what I'm wondering is, should we meet and we could look over the different cases and make that a work meeting for the zoning board? Do you guys wanna do that?
A work meeting.
On the
in
12th,
relation to
because-
this meeting.
To
Yeah,
compile the cases.
What that could
Big-
do, that kinda goes into what Ed just asked, is the planning board needs to start figuring out, we kinda try and choose our top 3 priorities, and from the zoning ordinance side, the zoning board could decide, well, what do you see, whether it's specific setbacks or something like that.
Mr. Chair, the way I document stuff is I actually keep a file folder of all the denials I submit. I could give it to you right now of all the denials going back years. What I don't have is, because those are in individual property files, is the results of them.
Correct.
But I could actually give you all of the denials going back years in a matter of
I think
seconds.
that's what we're looking for, is the trend of what's being asked.
If you want, tomorrow I could just print off all the denials going back, you tell me how long, and
Probably 2 or 3 years.
2 years.
Probably 2
3
years,
years.
yeah. 2, let's go with 2.
2.5.
If you do 2, and you realize
Actually,
it's not
that
updated.
might be a little bit going back that far, because during COVID, everything changed during COVID,
I was just-
where
yeah.
homeowners were, that may not be very accurate.
Sure.
The COVID timeframe was,
Yeah,
there was some crazy stuff going on.
Was
I'll do
there?
2, I'll do 2 years if
Getting
that works
noticed.
for you.
that's fine. We can always get more if we need it. That's great.
Quiet.
And if you can
Quiet
share it
time.
with, to Alana or to Teresa and I, and we'll, look at it and try to figure out how to, if there's nothing there to.
Does that sound good to you guys then?
If you do have a meeting on the 12th,
Yes, yes, okay.
we're gonna post that meeting, that they're having a meeting and open to the public for welcome opinion on what you're talking about.
always,
Just making sure, you're gonna post this as a workshop, I take it.
correct.
It's not a real meeting, but it should be
No,
agendized so people know what
do
you're talking
we-
about.
That's providing there's no special school district meeting, which there may be, I don't know.
Oh,
the
that's
date for
true.
it yet,
That's true.
But it's in the office.
Okay.
I hope it's not the 12th. I think they usually meet Wednesdays, do they? The school board?
I
Yes,
don't-
Yes.
because they usually conflict with this planning board.
Okay. So probably not the 12th.
All right, so obviously, planning board's got a lot of housekeeping that we've gotta clean up. There's gonna be a couple of public hearings probably to get some updates to the site plan review and subdivision regs. We've got some budget stuff to figure out to get prepared for. Potentially some definitions. I think a good point for us, the planning board, to consider is to try to figure out the site plan, what triggers that. Recommendations of fees to the select board, potential warrant article work, things would be, looking at ADUs, and do we wanna make changes to that?
This will be a workshop where you're gonna talk about, we're gonna have to discuss all this stuff?
I'm saying this is what's gonna be on our list, and will be on a future
which
agenda
list?
item. in the
Yeah, I
near
think
future.
it's not realistic to tackle it all at once, it's just we
No.
gotta figure out the priority.
Correct. So the planning board will have to determine that, so we'll talk about it and get that. I mean, some of the low hanging stuff, subdivision site plan review, updates, grammar stuff.
That's easy.
That's a meeting, if we're not making substantive changes especially, that's a public hearing, re-adopt them, get that cleaned up off our plate.
Fee change too, I should just resend.
Fee changes, that's gonna be a recommendation to the select board, so that'll be,
Yeah,
so
we can
McKinnon
just-
kinda-
I just sent an updated sheet, I included you, and we're just gonna, I think the board just needs to vote to recommend
Yep.
that the board of selectmen does review it, so, or recommended adopt it.
Yep, and then,
We could change the.
and then working with the ZBA and the building inspector to try to get an idea of what variances have been requested, or denials have been issued, and see if there's any way for the planning board, if it's appropriate for us to look at changing the zoning ordinance to, provide relief in certain areas. So, like a recap?
Good recap.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else for tonight that you'd like, make
The
sure?
only question is, and I'm gonna talk about it tonight, but because it's almost CIP season, is the planning board now supposed to be taking, what was the decision on that? Cause the board of selectmen was kind of getting this ball rolling,
Has been running it for years.
but wasn't it statutorily technically supposed to be the planning board?
Unless there's been any language found that that's been turned over to the select board, that's technically on our plate too.
Okay, so I guess we gotta figure out how to start polling for that and assembling that team.
Do you want a answer on that, as our next meeting for the select board is on the 12th?
Yes.
What's the Monday?
Great.
Monday would be the 11th.
It would be good to close the loop so we know who's supposed to be.
No, cause we'll just literally make a vote right there of what we're doing, we're either giving it to you, or or somebody will take the lead on our side.
That
That's
would probably
basically, and then we don't have to worry about a discussion, it'll be just answered. And then I'll have that answer to the Wednesday, cause we have a meeting on Monday, then I meet with you guys on Wednesday, so
Yep.
we'll be able to tell you right there what the decision was. And we'll make sure that we make a decision.
I think you guys
and It's
usually-
not something for us to discuss.
Usually CIP by October, you're trying to get who is on the committee.
Well, last year's was an absolute debacle,
Yeah.
and I'll say that out proud, because they only had like 2 meetings or 3, people weren't showing, it was just, so this year, we do have to do our due diligence to make it well more organized and planned out, so.
Yep.
I mean, maybe I'll be on that board, but I don't know, we'll
Your
figure that out.
position on-
Well, and, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Sylvia, anything else from either of you? I really appreciate you both being here and all of you for being here tonight as
Yeah,
well.
thank you for everybody, this was quite informative.
Appreciate it. This input, like I said, is really valuable because it helps us to not work in a vacuum. Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Adjourn, please.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Bascom, second by Ms. Mooney to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
It's a vote of more people like